right, sir. I was given the cue to go ahead and let's get started. Again, welcome everyone. My name is Twan Dean, and we're going to get started with today's presentation, all about teachers and autonomy and using AI in the classroom, and also using AI and understanding how its technology can be utilized as a learning and teaching tool. My job today is to introduce our wonderful speaker. He is from Waubonsee Community College. He is a senior outcomes assessment coordinator. He is dedicated to faculty support and student success through the collaboration of the courses and the workshops and all the programs at Waubonsee. His correlation, I'm sorry, his connection to his institution is all about looking at program outcomes, assessment designs, or assignment designs, and fostering collaborative discussion. These efforts improve student engagement and retention. He's currently working on his PhD in community, excuse me, and I mean, I just totally forgot. Uh, and curriculum studies at DePaul University. Sorry, I just forgot. And his research focuses on AI and the implementations of teaching and learning, as well as student and community voice implementations for stockholders, collaboration, and design thinking and assessment. His background comes from art and special education, his Master's of Arts in Teaching K through 12, and a Bachelor's of Arts in Art and Design. It is my honor to introduce our speaker, Chad, who is going to be talking about AI, which has changed how educators teach and use technology as an educational tool. Come and discover the top trends implementing and impacting college educators into 2024 and beyond. This presentation, Tech or Teachers Autonomy and AI Technology, will also examine what AI is and the impact on higher education. Without further ado, I would like to introduce to you all, and for those who are joining us, Chad Engel.
All right. Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here. Thanks to Magda, Twan, Shelly, and Laura for putting all this together and having me come and speak with all of you today. When it comes to questions and such, something I always like to start my conversations with when I give these presentations. I'm in the upwards of 20 plus over the past 12 months now with everything I've been doing. So please feel free to put in the chat. Please feel free if there's an urgent question, raise that hand right away. If you see a very strong opportunity to unmute and ask a question, I'm okay with that. Part of the reason I'm okay with that, when we're talking about generative AI technology and such, they're evolving at such a rapid pace. Actually, when I met Twan, one of the questions I was asked during our session was, what do we say to those that feel that they're behind the eight ball, essentially, with these AI technologies? Well, the reality is, and I actually write this in all the work I'm doing right now, is that all of us are. That's how fast it's evolving. It's impossible to really put a value to like how fast and rapidly things are evolving, the way these machines are capable of taking in data and information. To start here with the slides, there's a QR code, there's a tiny URL link. This will give you access to the entire slide deck. If for some reason you would like to use the slides for whatever reason, I'm perfectly fine with that. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to have an editable copy of the slides. It's done in Canva. This is a perfect example of us as educators. I feel like we have to come together right now and share these resources and not have full ownership of our material because this stuff is evolving so quickly. For instance, I know this is being recorded right now. It'll be used as a resource potentially moving forward. However, I also will start off in the beginning of this video saying everything we are saying today, everything we discussed today could change literally by the end of this presentation. That's how quickly things are evolving. And with that, let's get started. So to start, before we really get into the weeds of the conversation, I've been through a plethora of books. I've been through a plethora of papers, and I keep on being asked by my colleagues and people close to me about what should I read in order to have a good foundational understanding of what generative AI is and its potential implications. This book here called Unmasking AI by Dr. Joy Bolam-Weenie, I couldn't recommend it more. It's the only book or piece of literature I've read that I would recommend to any person to read. She does a really good job of contextualizing the conversation. And most important, this needs to be said, is that it's not necessarily from an educational perspective. It's more so just from the perspective of generative AI's total implication for society. And she does a great job of explaining it. The picture on the book, in fact, speaking to biases. Oh, also, I see Jem Elson. She's fantastic. Yes, she is. I unfortunately do not know her, so I hope to at some point to meet her. I'm not paid to do this or anything like that, but the book is that good. Anyways, the front cover of the book there. Part of the reason why you see the white mask and you see her in the background there is that she was working on a project a creative project to use facial recognition technology to create new things. And through that process and her doing that, she realized the data sets that she was working with and the tools she was using wouldn't recognize her own complexion, and specifically her being dark. And with that, she had a mask sitting next to her, a white mask, and she held up that white mask and it recognized that. And that quickly illustrates a very small piece of the bias issues within AI and data sets. The fact that it was essentially telling her more or less the mask was human, that she was not, and some type of conversations and things we need to be thinking about as we're going through this AI journey, especially with our students in the classroom and its potential use. The link there to the right on the slide, that's a link that for our organization, it's Algorithmic Justice League. I highly encourage you to check it out. Any of you that are familiar with the abolitionist teaching movement, there's a lot of similarities in terms of conversations, a good compare and contrast there, where one's really about the teaching implications, another one is really about the bias within coding. But can't recommend that enough. And it's on Audible if anyone's an audio person, you get that long commute ride in. Definitely a really good listen. Also, I want to share my own positionality on this, and my greatest fear is the loss of our humanity, our human touch, our innate capacity for unconditional human connections across the various relationships we maintain. I would contend that the sanctity of the human experience ought to guide our discussions. Now, this doesn't say AI lacks a role in this, but as we become increasingly reliant on machines, I do fear that our capacity for human connection may become more conditional, diminishing our ability to engage unconditionally. I actually had a colleague say to me recently, so you're anti-AI, right? I'm like, no, that's actually couldn't be further from the truth. However, I do think we need a nuanced conversation when we talk about things, specifically from the human connection component. For instance, I heard Tuan said that they missed seeing TJ when they entered the room. That's a very small example. The more reliant we become on the machines, the more reliant we become on settings like this, the more we remove ourselves from that authentic human connection piece, and something I would argue that we really need to consider when we're teaching our students. And with that, the guiding question I kind of come back to when we have these discussions is, how do we ensure the integrity of the learning process? A lot of times we start talking about plagiarism, we start talking about cheating, we kind of jump to the negative, and then there's usually two extremes, right? You got those that are really, really excited about it, and those that are really, really terrified about it. And that often comes with things frequently that are new. But when we really think about the teaching side of things, everyone in this room knows what good teaching looks like. We know what successful teaching can look like. If you read research, it will tell you that smaller class sizes, usually 15 or less, you get to know your students, and you know their aspirations, and you know their challenges they want to improve upon. And if you know those things, you can help them and guide them throughout that journey of the learning process, which is unrelated to the ideas of plagiarism, cheating, like on a summative assessment or summative assignment. So it uses our guiding question for today. The agenda, so we'll do a quick little introduction, give some myths and realities, AI and assignments, personalized learning with AI. I got 3 different quick little demos. I'm not going to walk through all of them like step by step because I want to leave time for a lot of good Q&A. More importantly, with those demos, you'll see 3 different links on there. They give you exact examples from ChatGPT, gives you a script link and a prompt link, and I'll walk through those, what those mean. Then I'm going to leave us off with some guiding questions about things I would encourage all of you to consider and potentially think about in researching as we move forward. All right, so what is AI? Generative machine learning, and what the reason why this stuff really has become to the forefront is it starts with the idea of just how large our memory banks have become. So the reason why I say that is that machine learning's been around for a long time. ideas of artificial intelligence have been debated for a long time. For instance, I've heard and I've read things as simplistic as the speedometer in a car or a gauge in the car being a form of AI. We could think about clocks being a form of AI. Now we've evolved to the point where we have computing systems and other things of this nature. But the reason why generative AI has come to the forefront mainly is because of the vast amounts of storage we have now. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, a lot of times I get asked if I think things can become sentient. So, Terminator, Age of Ultron for our Marvel fans in the room here. And I used to be a flat out no, but I really started thinking about it. And if you had an infinite amount of memory space, or like a server that just had an infinite amount of space on it to cycle through data over and over and over again, and it's kept on evolving and evolving. The question would become then, at what point does the data within that server or that memory area become so vast, so large, it could develop some form of consciousness? So to use a Marvel example of Ultron, so if it had an unlimited amount of data in that memory bank, and you asked it, what's the single most dangerous thing in our universe? It would probably say humans. So the logical reaction from the machine then would be, well, we have to get rid of all humans if we want to save the universe. Hence Age of Ultron and the whole Marvel movie experience there. Now, from a teaching perspective, we talk a lot about the large language models. The reason why I started off with that book, Unmasking AI by Dr. Boilen-Weenie, is because with these large language models, we have to be very, very mindful of the biases that exist. So for instance, I gave a demo once where I was using a generative image tool, so DALL-E, the other side of ChatGPT, the image generator. And I asked it to take this short little prompt I wrote about my life story and create it. Give me a westernized image. It came up with having 2 kids, which I do have 2 kids right now, and like gave this really beautiful picture that you'd see in like children's storybooks. And I said, well, both my kids like to eat rice. My wife is Filipino, and it's part of the cuisine that they have to eat it at least 3 times a week. Otherwise, I'll never hear the end of it. It didn't change anything really in the image. It showed my 2 sons eating rice. And then I said, well, we live in Chicago. And automatically puts the north side of Chicago, gives this fake image of kind of like living out in the middle of the lake looking down at the Sears Tower. And then I said, well, no, we actually live in the south side of Chicago. And then right after I said that, all of a sudden the 2 images of the children in the picture automatically turned to a different race or culture based upon the data set it was pulling. Reason being is that it was pulling from demographical data sets, so it automatically changed that. Algorithms, a process set of rules to be followed, so that's a perfect example of a process or set of rules to be followed. The reason why these systems end up becoming biased, and this is something that in Unmasking AI that Dr. Boilen-Weenie gets into and explains really well, is that all these systems and coding processes stem from us, the people within the area. Typically, they're dominated in Western civilization, which I don't need to articulate all the challenges within that, but as you can imagine, they become vast. And then since they go through a cycle process and they learn over and over and over again, we have to be very mindful that there's no way to really control how these things grow. For instance, has anyone in the room, and please unmute yourself if you do know the answer to this, saw what happened to Google when they tried to put parameters on things? Is anyone in the room familiar with what happened to Google? Jim Ellison, would you mind muting and sharing?
Sure, it screwed up everything. So it started trying to be politically correct, and then you'd ask it for a picture of the Pope, and it would show a black female.
Yep.
So they had to take the whole thing down, and then they lost, like, I don't know, $40 billion in stock value.
Yeah. It was a big time mess. Thank you for that answer. Intent, I think we could all agree in the space in the room. They went into the idea or the concept, putting parameters on this with the right intent. However, with that intent, what they couldn't do is estimate or essentially what information was going into it that would give the resulting action. So remember, every single time you put a piece of information within a generative AI tool, down to the single character, down to the single pixel of that said character within even a large language model, it teaches the system something new. It categorizes and labels it within its own system or framework. This creates a lot of challenges for programmers because as of right now, there's legitimately no way to actually put parameters on something to say more or less it's guaranteed not to do X, Y, or Z. One of the things to be very very concerned about as we move forward is there's several companies right now that are starting to try to make claims that we have the best data, we have the best resources, we have the good data. Our AI tool you use in your classrooms only uses reliable resources. Essentially, more or less, they're saying it's not going to hallucinate. Well, factually speaking, from a computer science perspective, that it's impossible to make claims such as that right now. And that gets into the whole deep neural network, the input-output idea. So every time you put in something and put into the input of AI or generative AI machine, it ends up taking that information, warehousing it in the data, and that's where that deep neural network idea comes from. The reason why artificial intelligence gets connected to these large language models, the deep neural networks, the generative machine learning, is deep neural networks essentially look like the brain. Think about all the synapses you see in a brain, how they interconnect and get categorized and labeled throughout the brain. That's what they visually look like. So the debate is it intelligent or not intelligent? And I would like to open that to the room. Do you think these systems are intelligent or not intelligent? Anyone like to give their thoughts on that? Feel free to reword that question, throw it back at me too, if you'd like.
Sure, I would just take intelligence to mean you can solve problems. So
Okay, problem solving.
depends on your definition. So if I use that one, then they're definitely intelligent, soon to be way more intelligent than us.
Anyone else?
I believe they are only as intelligent as the people who enter the data into it. But because there is a combined amount of people, it's probably greater than the one person.
Do facts equate to intelligence? Like a list of facts or a list of given things?
Partially, in my opinion.
Partially? All right. Anyone else?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I would say that the AI is partially intelligent. It is intelligent enough to cite or search for information, but not intelligent enough to know exactly how it should be expressed or how it will react in the human capacity.
I like that. Express or react to the human capacity. That's a really good one. Anyone else that stir anyone else's thoughts? All right. So unplugging the myths and realities here. AI will replace teachers. That's a big one I've heard frequently. Now, could AI be used as something to improve upon a skill set? So let's say you're in programming or coding and you're learning how to code, or if you're trying to learn another language or learn a new language, could it support your learning process? Yes, it could support your learning process. However, so the thing I would keep in mind when it comes to AI will replace teachers, there's other things to look at, like calculators will replace mathematicians. There's always a human component to things. These AI systems, for instance, I don't know if anyone's seen Sora lately, the video system. It creates these videos that are beautiful. However, there still needs to be a thought process of storyboarding. There still has to be a thought process. The person inputs information. So there's always going to be a place for the human piece to it. And as I gave my positionality statement, I think this is very important for us to consider and think about, is that the only way we can have unconditional events occur within our society is through the human experience, the inherent want to do something. Versus every time we use a piece of technology, whether it's a generative AI system or us on this platform right now, there's always a natural input-output function of every piece of machines that we use. So we have to be very mindful of that human piece there of unconditionality. AI understands like humans, and that gets into that, is that it cannot. Can it make assumptions, or could it draw conclusions potentially based on the given data set within its system? Sure. it could make assumptions based upon the data. However, it cannot understand like humans and make connections to the actual human it's interacting with in that way. Depersonalizes education. So it can pretty much kind of do the reverse if it's leveraged in an appropriate way. Could depersonalization happen? Sure, a student could disconnect themselves altogether, but I would argue too that students have disconnected themselves through many forms in the past, whether skipping class or being sucked into social media. There's many forms of depersonalization of education. AI is always unbiased. That's a big one. It is not. It's there's always a level of biasness within there. Now, something to keep in mind with the unbiased versus biased conversation. Remember, it's based upon given data sets. So the output may appear biased, but the data set it's working with, such as demographics in a population-based data set, could be accurate, but the output could be assumption and completely biased in terms of what it's assuming based on the given data set. Make students lazy. That I'm not sure how many people have used AI in the room here, or how many of you are actively using it, or have had students use. I know Twan had experience with a student. But make students lazy. That's a very complex one, because the same students who are turning in low quality work, I would argue, are still turning in low quality work. They may be trying to leverage AI to make their low quality work, quote unquote, look better. And sure, it may, but I can tell you from someone who goes through generative AI and reads about it all the time that I can quickly identify it. In fact, I've know several educational leaders I've been teasing lately that have been using generative AI for their boilerplate emails, and I can see it before even I'm running it through a machine or not. Does anyone want to talk about a lazy conversation? Curious. They want to give an example of that?
Well, if I may, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go right ahead.
Go ahead, Magda. Oh, okay, I'll go first. I had a lazy conversation. Well, in this case, a student who used AI, all of you, to complete his project, because the project was given to my students 5 weeks in advance. And the student told me because of his work schedule, he couldn't do the project on time, so he used AI to complete the project within a day. Submitted the project, and the project, when he went through the AI system, did not answer the 19 fundamental questions that were assigned to the student, and also assigned in as my rubrics to make sure that the students understood what they were doing. So in that sense of what Chad was saying about lazy, I think that's what it was. I think the student found an easy way to do the project. However, didn't answer. That's why I said about the human emotion, because there were some, half of the questions in this case had the human emotion that the AI was not familiarized with, so nor could the AI answer those questions. Yes, Magda.
So, in my perspective, students can be lazy, but me as a student, and I use ChatGTP, thank you, Jim. It takes me a lot of time to go through it. So it's not laziness on my
You're
hand.
welcome.
I just need I need a prompt, or I need a idea to steer me in the right direction. So I'm not the copy paste type. I'm more give me idea, get me started when I'm feeling really stuck, and then it gives me the starting point, and then I go with it. But it takes me a lot of time to put the correct prompt and talk to ChatGTP. Even I use mostly ChatGTP to talk more, to get more info, to get more insights. Then I email Jim and I say, hey, he doesn't understand me. It's my accent again, blah, blah, blah. How do I do it? Or I find Jim on a hallway and say, what else can I do to get the better answer so I can get there? So for me, it takes me a lot of time. So I don't think it's laziness. But that being said, my high school students, what they do, they copy paste, and they really don't think about the prompts. They really don't think about the answers. They don't remove the biases, so it's quick and easy for them to copy
So
paste. But if you look into the way Jim does, I don't think it's lazy.
one thought about that, and this is a hard conversation for all of us to have in terms of really getting at the root of this question. If we're saying that our students are using something incorrectly, inappropriately, what is our task to do then? As educators in the room, what is our task?
Teach them how to use it.
Teach them how to use it exactly. And
Give them also parameters on how to use it as well too.
correct parameters on how to use it. Like for instance, one of the things specifically when it comes to writing papers and such, I tell instructors all the time, when you're working on things with your students, encourage them to essentially do a basically barf out like an entire thing like of writing. However they want to do it, whether it's poetry, whether it's kind of a mixture of different languages, whether it's straight up English, it's completely up to them. Just encourage them to write a bunch of things. And then when they find something that's good, then, and I always tell them that I always preface this too, encourage them to do 1 to 2 lines of writing at a time when they're going through and editing things or trying to improve something or build upon idea. It's when we get ourselves in trouble, whether it's a user from a student perspective or an educator perspective, adult, whatever the case may be, is what, like for example, the one student that Twan was talking about that tried to have the system do an entire project that wasn't accurate whatsoever. And to me, that was more of a thing about the student just essentially giving up on the class. That conversation almost unrelated to the AI tool, because that they would have turned in essentially something that was probably bad, whether it was generative AI or not. They may have asked another friend to do it or found a different solution to something or try to find a different solution to something, but that is more related to the students outside things outside the classroom. Anyways, is there any, I think there was a Nathan, wasn't there? Or Jim, did you have something you want to say about the lazy conversation?
I'm taking it as one of my jobs to teach them how to use it. So in their actual assignments, they're preparing themselves for exams using ChatGPT, and then I assess how well they're using ChatGPT, and then I assess how well they did on the exam. So I'm telling them they can't even go into the future until they get good at using AI as a
I like that.
assistant to them. So they're, I'm lighting a fire under them, and they can't even proceed in the material until they use ChatGPT to do it.
I like that, Jim. And I appreciate the Monet poster in the background there.
Well, that's going back to like what Jim was saying. That's what I'm saying about teaching or us as educators, giving them those parameters of how to utilize any AI in this case. Because at the time when my student did that, did I consider him being lazy? Yeah, because after the conversation of doing the project and the assignment within an hour, because Chat GPT did that, or whatever AI system you use. However, in the sense that I didn't at the time have any parameters to say that they could utilize it because it was still coming out and it was still very vast. But then also, it didn't hit to the core of what I was looking for because the project was more of an assessment to say exactly what they've learned in the course. And what my take from it, what you've learned, the student in this case, you learned how to use an AI, not effectively, but you learned how to use an AI to try to get a good grade over something you eventually didn't learn the entire semester.
Mm-hmm. Now, does there anybody want to make the case for it making students lazy? Because remember, as Tuan mentioned, I'm in a doc program right now and about to enter year 3 to my research. I'm all about arguing when it comes to these different points, counterpoints. And it's always good to hear the other side as well. Is there anyone like vehemently against AI use? All right. Well, okay. So we'll get into some of those realities then. We kind of touched on them. I don't have to spend too much time on these. Augments teaching. Clearly, when you're thinking about its implications for teaching and learning, it's a very safe space to live in these conversations we're having when you're just talking about augmentation. That's where we're going to be living for quite a while during this change management process we're going to have within the educational sphere. It makes us process things differently. And one of the analogies I use, and I know Tuan teaches math, so I'm sure it's something he had to adjust throughout his career, is calculator use in a math classroom. Now it's commonplace in many respects. However, it's very much structured to ensure like the number sense still gets developed. You understand the problem solving, what you're solving for. The arithmetic is kind of went off to the wayside a little bit, but also there's a reality that you can be the smartest math person in the room, but no business is going to hire you as an accountant and let you not use a calculator and make you work in a standard book anymore. So, but that's not to say that you can't understand the fundamental processes that you're dealing with. Personalizes. I was like Jim's example there. I've heard this one numerous times, and I'm glad I'm hearing it more frequently now too. Is help with final exam things. Like for instance, especially with the nature of what we usually are working with first year and second year students. When it comes to programs or like a course like such as microbiology, that's typically are known to be a bit more difficult, just because the vast amounts of definitions and things you have to know, or something like if you're in a nursing program, you're a medical student. Some of the science areas where you actually have to take a licensure exam or a clinical or such. It's really good to go through if a student knows, like for example, they're not very good with their pharmaceuticals within their nursing program. They can use the AI tool to help support them in that process of learning. However, we always have to remember these things be biased. For instance, I had a really interesting conversation with an integrity board that gave an example of a paper that was submitted. Technically speaking, the paper was mostly correct, and it got flagged for plagiarism because there was a misquote in it. The misquote was done by the generative AI tool. It was off by about 3 words, and it was quoting Socrates. Had a citation and stuff. Technically, the citation was accurate. However, I don't agree with this, but the integrity board at that point in time stated the student plagiarized and put them on academic penalty. I find that very interesting because the student at that point in time, throughout their entire learning process in the classroom, had an A up to that point of the assignment. They had that one misquote, and then they got put in front of the academic integrity board. Also, openly and candidly, when it comes to these conversations, we have to be very mindful about the students we're putting in front of these integrity boards and the students we're flagging for so-called AI misuse. We have to be extremely mindful of it. Typically speaking, it's going to be our non-majority students when you in conversation. Now, it's anecdotally speaking, but I'm sure many of you have seen this through conversation yourself. And we have to be very mindful of those things. Typically, students from a non-Western culture, it's frequently students where English is not the first language, and that can be a challenging conversation. Something to keep in mind too, this idea of cheating. What did those who had access to, and there's been many stories about this, especially with standardized testing, had access to the funds, what did they do in order to game the system? Who can raise their hand and tell me that? What have those students done historically? Go ahead, Jim.
They would pay Tawan to go take the test for them.
Exactly. So when we're having these conversations, it's something especially when it comes to this idea of bias, we'll be very mindful of this and be extremely sensitive. And as a white male, I'm speaking to this openly and candidly because unfortunately, many times the colleagues I've spoken with frequently look like myself and are speaking from an area of deficit in these conversations. So just want to throw that out there. We have to be very mindful of these conversations we're having, especially within our political climate, just to do the best we can to ensure we're not going down that biased route ourselves as individuals. So I encourage all of you, like if you have a situation come across your desk, do what educators do best and collaborate. Ask your colleagues, talk with them. Like, is this something I should be concerned about or not? We've all had those conversations before, like for student discipline, right? Like, oh man, that student's a great student. They just messed up this one time. Do I really, like, I know I'm supposed to proceed, but do I really want to proceed right now? Because it could ruin the student's academic experience. Whether it's K-12, higher ed, it doesn't matter where it's at educationally. So I encourage everyone to really think these things through as we are learning more and more about generative AI. Does anyone have any questions or comments about that?
Yeah, I collaborate with my students is how I do it. So I tell them that I'm not here to educate them. That's their job to educate themselves, and I'm a
Yep.
resource. So then we had a conversation today for about 20 minutes about if you're using Microsoft Word, is that cheating? And then what about at the other end, if you copy an AI output and copy paste it into your assignment, is that cheating? So those are two obvious examples. It's all on a continuum. So how do we figure out where that point is, where those points are in between? And I treat it as a we conversation. How are we going to work with this? And we figure it out
Correct.
because I'm telling them their degree, that if they use, our classes as hurdles to get to a degree, they're going to end up with an empty life. So I tell them what the real job around here is education, not degrees, not grades, whatever. So you can only cheat your way to a degree. You can't cheat your way to an education.
Yep.
It's true. And from my class, you're right, from mathematics, we talked about the 6 principles. For all of you, there are 6 principles that teachers, and this is K through 12, need to implement within their curriculum, their discussions, and also within the class structure. And technology is one of them. So one of the things that the collaboration, like Jim was saying, with my students, we are going to talk about how AI can be used not only in their education and helping them to design their project, but also as future teachers, because I teach math for elementary educators. So they're going to be seeing this. And then also we're going to be talking about the math apps out there. You're right. There's all these different things that not only they don't hinder students, they help, hopefully they help them, but hopefully they will have some structure in with their communication with their students of how they can utilize it, but not abuse it.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, a couple of things there. I want to relate it back to those are good examples of when I had present that learning process question. Whenever you engage your students in the learning process, cheating and plagiarism really go out the window. Because the thing is that you know your students so well and what they're capable of and where they're at in their learning journey that inherently you're going to have a product in a situation where it's going to reflect their actual skill level. Essentially, just because they feel comfortable with you as the educator in the room. And to Jim's point about this idea that learning how to learn, essentially, that's that unconditional component I was talking about, that human connection piece. If we have learners who want to unconditionally learn, like they don't need conditions around wanting to learn. Learning is something that's natural for humans, that we're always seeking to learn. Whenever you have a student that enters your classroom that doesn't want to learn, why is that? We got a bunch of educators in the room. Why is that? When you have a student enter the room that doesn't want to learn, what happens? Magda?
So when they don't want to be in a room, they jeopardize everything and they do everything possible to not succeed in a class. I have students who parents force them to come there, and there is really little I can do to convince them. So I'm trying to build a relationship and kind of getting them into the point, understanding, hey, we in it together. I know you don't want to be here. Let's figure out how we can get it made. And there are some students still so hard-headed that they just don't want to be here, and they want to prove the parents that they don't want to be there, and
Yep.
they shouldn't be there.
And that's a perfect example to my unconditional versus conditional conversation. For those students in particular, everything in learning has been made conditional. And then even off of that, so when we're looking and thinking about that a bit more, when things are made conditional, you can even think of from a K-12 conversation about punitive punishment. So like if the student's being a class clown, they get sent out of the classroom. Learning stops frequently. all of a sudden that opportunity to become that unconditional learner, to allow that just to foster within a classroom setting or within a learning setting, whether it's outside or within a defined space, gets eliminated. It's things we have to be very considerate of as we move forward, especially in conversation with things about generative AI. All right, so AI and assignments. I'm not going to go through all these links here. They're in here specifically. This slide deck's basically made to be a resource for you to go through and explore. So there's some cool data analysis tools within this link here. It gives you a YouTube link here. Sorry, I didn't want to do the ad there. I was hoping the video just pop up. Had it loaded earlier. So the data analysis tools there gives you a good, quick little video about all those things. A lot of it's related to the computer programming. These grammar and plagiarism checkers, obviously everyone's familiar with like stuff that's built into Google, Microsoft Word, or most people are familiar with that. The one that I really want to highlight is Quillbot. Has anyone ever heard of Quillbot? So Quillbot is a unique tool. Oh, Twan's heard of Quillbot. Cool. So Quillbot's a very unique tool because what they're trying to do is code switch between languages. So get to a point where it's not even just translation, where like some of those patterns in the way we speak and the way we share stories will be able to be translated across languages more accurately. Now, there's a lot of other things that go into code switching, such as that human connection piece again, but it's a really unique tool. Quillbot, it'll be listed in that grammar and plagiarism checker resource. Research assistant tools, there's some really cool ones out there. Like one of them, there's a lot of visualization tools where if you, like, for example, me looking at Dr. Bolin-Weeni's work, I can put her name in, and the people that she's cited in the past, it'll show me a quick little visualization of other researchers that are talking about the same things or have been used in her work, or they've used her in their work. And it'll start clustering up those big ideas for me. Graphics, this one here, I want to spend a little bit of time on this, and the reason being is this has changed a lot over the past 6 months. Is anyone familiar with what happened to Taylor Swift?
Jim, as a Swiftie, you should know that.
She became the greatest thing ever.
Well, besides that, my wife would fully agree.
Oh,
Is everyone aware of what happened in social media of Taylor Swift?
I heard something happened, but I never actually checked into it.
So be careful if you were to search up what occurred with her. Make sure you're on a safe search engine, and that goes with any of these things when related to graphics. There's graphics tools out there that make some very negative content. She, for those of you unfamiliar, is currently, at least I believe she still is, and Jim, feel free to correct me if she's not. She's dating Travis Kelce, a star football player of the Kansas City Chiefs that just won the Super Bowl.
I hate
And
that guy.
anyways, so with that, she came into the sports spotlight a lot more. Any football fans in here will probably have seen the memes and jokes about how many times will they, pan over to Taylor Swift during the football game because that's more important than the football game. But anyways, with that, someone took an image generator and made some very negative images of Taylor Swift, and they're very problematic because they're hyper real. Like for instance, in one of the conversation talking points I was having last week with a colleague is, if you're from a country where video is not present to you on a daily basis, is not accessible to you on your daily basis, what the dangers potentially could be of like showing one of those image generators or video generators of like a famed politician of a different country with a lot of power. You can make them say whatever you want and it looks hyper real. You can create images that are very negative of anything you want. So, oh, thank you, Jim, and good luck at your class tonight. So things to think about these image generators. It's going to be something that unfortunately it's probably not going to be reacted to until negative things happen. But be very mindful of in your own classrooms. Unfortunately, just speaking from my K-12 background stuff, I would be terrified to know of what bullying instances this could turn into. Not to mention it can happen in higher ed as well. So just be aware of it. But these image generators are very real. They create these hyper realistic images, and the reason why they do, they can zoom into the smallest pixel, and when you're just changing the color of a small pixel, that creates this large, beautiful, hyper defined image, it'd be actually, when in theory, it makes it very simple to make a very realistic image. So just think about like that one piece of information. If it can read all the different color spectrums within the one image, it's actually quite simple to think about how a machine could generate an entire highly defined image, something that's very real. Idea generation. Magda brought this up before. I'm sure a lot of you in the room have used it for idea generation. If you haven't, there's a bunch of good prompt engineering resources out there to look up about idea generating. One of the fun activities I like to do as an educator is I'll have my students go through an idea generator, and then I'll challenge them to find what the generative AI system we're using doesn't know. So like, can you break it essentially? Can you make it completely hallucinate something that's just completely off the wall? And that's can be a fun activity, so the students can start kind of seeing and learning about like, oh, I probably shouldn't say this like this. It completely changed everything we're talking about. It's not even talking about the topic we're talking about now. Tuan.
I just wanted to add, Terry also mentioned it in the chat area, saying that AI is good to generate ideas, and I just wanted to point that out because she did state
Yeah.
that.
Yep. Terry, do you want to give any examples of how you've used it for idea generation?
Well, yeah, I think that the students, if they're kind of stuck about what they want to write about, they could use AI to get some ideas for the content of the paper. Just as a quick example, if they wanted to write about the structure of the heart, AI would be able to generate the names of those structures for them, and then they could use other sources or whatever to write their paper, but it could essentially give them an outline or a framework from which to work.
Yeah, I like that example too, because it kind of reverse engineers the research process too. Because from that framework, then they have to fact verify, right? So they go in that research mindset where it says, there's this many chambers, there's this many ventricles and such, and now they have to go and find actual diagrams of this, and if this is factual or not, and then how can I write about it for whatever that prompt may be.
Correct. Yeah, and I hadn't thought about it the way you just said about like reverse engineering the paper.
Yep.
That's a really good observation, and I'm gonna remember that and maybe even build it into my presentation
Yep.
to the students about AI.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And math teachers have a lot of exposure to this because these calculator tools, I know a lot of us think about the cell phone calculator, but if you're teaching a stats class, there's a calculator for everything, every type of data set out there. So they've had to do a lot of reverse engineering. So if you're looking like for ideas or literature to read about that, like thought processes in terms of learning of how to reverse engineer things, math is a very good subject to go to for that.
If I may, for all of you, as Chad led that into the discussion, we have a roundtable discussion that are inviting two book vendors, which is Pearson and McGraw-Hill Education, that's going to come in and talk about how they utilize AI within the education setting for higher education, and how it can be utilized in your classrooms as well too.
I'm glad you brought that up, Tuan, because you just jogged my memory on something I was working on the other day. Something I've been asked frequently a lot is about final exams. And for areas where you don't necessarily need a final exam, like it's good to have one, such as typically mathematics or sciences, but you don't necessarily need one. What you could do is take your current final exam, and a really good prompt to ask it to do is using the following final exam. Please create a problem-based learning structure that will take students approximately 1 to 2 hours to complete within a classroom setting using zero technology. So there's a really good way to articulate out a way to leverage your final exam and change it up. And the really cool thing about that is that a lot of times, like a lot of those things we've heard about in the past as educators, like design thinking process, you should use that. Project-based learning, you should use that. You should do this, you should do that. And it's like, yeah, all of it sounds great, but where's the time, right? So as educators, this is a good transition to what we were talking about. leverage generative AI to help bridge the gaps in those things that you haven't had the time for, because we all know that depending on the setting, the location we're in, the class content, every class or student group being uniquely different, there's times where certain classes go smooth and you're kind of like, whoa, that was a little bit too simple. I'm a bit concerned right now, but okay, I'll take it. And there's other classes you walk into expecting it to be too simple, and it's like, what just happened? So when you need that opportunity to change lanes in different subject areas or classrooms you're teaching, leverage it, use it. Put that assignment in your design, like, hey, tell it exactly, like, I'm using this assignment, it's worked in the past. However, with this class, X, Y, and Z is not working now. Redesign to re-emphasize X, Y, and Z. And then it'll generate that X, Y, and Z for you. And then you may not like Y or Z, but you can be like, oh, Y or Z is not hitting the point, but I do like X. Could you expand more on X and give me a 5-step process to accomplish step X? And then it gives you a 5-step process. Then it would say, you know what, I don't like step 5. Can you change step 5 to this? And then it generates that. So it can, in a way, help and support you in that start that dialogue piece you would have typically with a colleague within your same discipline. All right, so personalized learning with AI. Just gave an example of that, and that's the human component of that is exactly 100%. And something that's really cool and unique with ChatGPT now and a lot of the AI servers is that you can actually share your prompts. So like for my role as the assessment coordinator, I was just working with my cybersecurity faculty, and we're working through course descriptions and writing outcomes. And what I did is I took our curriculum council's set of rules for how we have to write and generate things, and I expanded on those and gave it 2 prime examples of what our institution deems as being well-written course description outcomes. And we took our ideas and notes and asked generative AI to help draft us the course description, the outcomes, based upon the given set of rules. And it gave us a good working point. And then from there, then we just wordsmithed it. All that time that it took before to email back and forth, I shared a prompt link, and we just followed that prompt link as we were moving along. And that's an example of personalized learning with AI, is that we found common connections through using that chat system. Similar to what you do with a student, so that's a perfect example of adaptive. And yep, another example of generating ideas. Skill gap analysis is really, really cool. Specifically even for yourself, like if you want to, like for example, something I've done personally is when I'm writing something and I send to my writing center, I get my feedback from my faculty member, and I'm like, I still don't feel as if X is good enough. I will actually talk with a generative AI bot and be like, this is the feedback I got from my writing center, this is the feedback I got from my faculty member. However, I still don't like X. Is there any additional things I should think about or I could connect to related upon these other 2 things? It'll give me a list of ideas. And then I'll say, give me a list of 5 ideas. It'll give me a list of 5 ideas. And I'll go and research those a bit more. Learning recommendations, another example, learning recommendations, and all this stuff's on demand. That's something that's beautiful too. So if you have a student that wants to work at 3 in the morning on something, if they have the skill sets to go through a prompt engineering process, they'd be able to do so, or even us as educators. And I know we're getting close to time. I want to leave time for Q&A. So AI for individual needs. So you have a script link here. So this is the prompt. You have a draft script link. So this is what it actually filled in. So you can take a look at an example. Then there's actually a ChatGPT example here. I hyperlinked in these, which will take you here and it'll show you the actual script with the information filled in and the output. So you can take through, go ahead and go through all those and see how they work. Feel free to use those prompts, manipulate those prompts, change them up, create your own. Really good way to get started, like this idea for AI for individualized needs for students. Pardon me. Instructor prompts. So it gives you a different set of rules or prompt ideas for doing instructor prompts with AI. And then you have this also AI and feedback. So for example, let's take a look at a script link here. So if you were to click on a script like, oh, I'm curious about this. All this is here is it gives you the prompt here. Please review the following student writing example and evaluate based on the criteria provided. Student writing sample, copy and paste it in. Here's my evaluation criteria. Please provide the feedback for each area. And here it has the thesis statement feedback, supporting evidence, organization, grammar mechanics, cohesion, word choice, and such. Nice thing about this, and I do think we're going to get to a point at a certain as we move forward, this would be something that would be great to share back with a student immediately or have them do themselves. That student voice piece there. So like, here's a prompt, copy and paste your work in here. Here's your grading criteria rubric, have it evaluate your work, share the prompt back with me, and we'll discuss some of the things that you can take from it. So especially for when you talk about student conferencing. AI's future in education. Here's some different areas of research interest that are coming to the forefront. Pedagogical integration, teacher autonomy and AI, which we're talking about today. Collaborative decision-making, feedback loop, professional development with AI, classroom dynamics, ethical considerations, and then evaluation and assessment. There's a link here at the bottom, these call to action questions. And if you click on that, you'll see these categorized by these different areas, and this gives you guiding questions to consider when thinking about these things. So feel free to use those questions. And speaking of questions, I want to open up the floor for any burning questions that anyone had throughout the presentation. If you want to challenge anything as we talked about, free to. Additionally, that's my personal email address, so feel free to reach out to me. The QR code and the tiny URL links my link to my LinkedIn profile, so if you want to connect, feel free to do so. With that, I'll open up the questions. Susan.
Oops. Okay. I'm just learning about this. A lot of it is still kind of confusing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would you suggest is a good place to start?
That book I shared in the beginning, which I got my desk right here. Yep.
Okay.
And I really encourage everyone to listen to it on Audible. And part of the reason being is that it's kind of written as an autoethnography. And there's something that's really cool about that, of her telling the story of her learning from her personal experience. It allows you to kind of think about it from a personal experience as well and relate it back to your own place of work and really get an idea of how to kind of start thinking about these things. And as I said in the beginning, Susan, don't ever feel afraid that you're being left behind or for some reason like that, like a lot of people do with generative AI. Things evolve so quickly in this sphere that it needs to just be a common conversation that we just talk about, and then we'll see where it goes from there. It's kind of like if you think back when social media was first invented, how quickly it evolved and how quickly it grew. Similar conversation with generative AI.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Magda?
Hi. So, quick questions. I would love to know if you know a good AI platform that would give me a sources of the statements. So, preferably peer-reviewed.
My best recommendation right now, and I know a lot of people are trying to come to where OpenAI and ChatGPT are at. The most effective system, I think, is the ChatGPT Plus version. So getting the 4, I have subscription to that. The reason being, it's similar to Google in the sense that they have a bunch of add-ons now, and there's people building bots specifically for those type of things. However, with any generative AI tool, there's always potential it can hallucinate. So you always want to go through and verify the resource. And then you'll find too that like if it's an area of study that you're really interested in, you'll start seeing common names coming up, and you'll know that you're on the right prompt engineering pathway of using quality resources. But as of right now, I would lean towards ChatGPT 4 and some of the add-ons. And like there's like one called ScholarBot that can help you research things with peer-reviewed resources.
Okay, Jim, you won. I'm getting it.
Oh, Jim stepped out. If I may, for everyone, as is continuing answering questions, one question came up in regards to his PowerPoint presentation. I'll be sharing that with everyone after today. If you have any additional concerns or questions, you can please reach out to Chad, or you can reach out to the CTE, and we can reach out to Chad on your behalf. Chad, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah. Please email me. I have colleagues emailing all the time now. I've even ventured into like For instructors not sure how to talk with their students about it, I've had many instructors invite me virtually to their classrooms to talk with students about it. So if you ever want support that way, just feel free to email me and we'll see if we can figure something out.
Okay.
Other questions? Jack?
Yes. I want to ask you, Chad, this is a great presentation. Thank you. I want to ask you about like how there is any data indicate until this point how biased the AI could be, or we can.
Ooh, so this gives them that human piece to it again. It's as so it really depends on the prompts you're giving it. It really depends on the input output nature of it. It really depends on someone fact verifying the information that you get out of it. So it's as biased as humans let it be, is the short answer to it. And with that, we unfortunately look at our media right now. When I say it's as biased as as humans let it be, unfortunately, I think us as a society, as a global society, we unfortunately let media be a little bit too biased with things at this point in time. So think about that, and then in fact connect that back to the generative AI piece. A lot of the data information is pulling in is from media-based sources, whether you may view them as factual or not. So there's always the opportunity for it to be biased. It never goes out the window. In part, that's the reason why I always talk about the unconditional nature of it, the human connection piece to it. We have to be directly involved. That's not to say don't use it, not to be afraid of it, but it is to say to be mindful of it.
So my only, concern is all about like, I think about AI the same like I think about Google. It's like something you put in there and
Yep.
you wanna search. Yes, this is it. But
Mhm.
is it something like AI fed the information certain way to get you through? Or I don't even know where the AI got those information
So
anymore.
that's the challenge of the parameter conversation, because
Yeah.
each individual character, the phrasing of words, when it starts learning a user, it starts drawing on different resources depending on all these different instances within the machine learning algorithm. Because it's machine learning, it cycles through over and over and over again. And every time you put an input into it, it adds to its mass data set. That means it grows and it keeps on growing. When something keeps on growing, that means the categories and labels for which the data is organized and within the system keeps on growing, which means there's no way to house it. Actually, it just kind of made me think of another unique analogy. Think about a child's innocence. Like, we try to protect the innocence of a child, but at a certain point in time, their brains keep on growing, they keep on learning, and there's no way to protect the innocence their entire life.
which
Similar
goes
to an
which goes back to Jack, what Chad was talking about with Google. That was one of the things that happened
yeah,
with Google. It was trying to learn, but then it felt like a
yeah,
child was being
yeah,
overwhelmed, and it made plenty. I shouldn't say plenty. It made a lot of mistakes, so they
yeah.
had to pull it because it was just making too many mistakes of generating information or searching for the information, even though it was within Google. Microsoft had the same problem when they came out with their version of AI. It was at the time
Yep.
doing a lot of searches, and they thought it was going to be great. And they launched it, and it was over. It just like a person, it felt like it was overwhelmed and was making too many mistakes, and they had to pull the plug to go back and see what was wrong with it.
Another thing I relate back to that's been common conversation over the past few decades is the idea of color blindness. That's where a lot of it exists. Like, you can't be blind to it. You have to acknowledge what's directly in front of your face. You have to acknowledge what the reality is of things going on. And unfortunately, within these tools, we have to acknowledge, exactly what's coming out of them based on our inputs. But once again, in terms of the data sets, like, I didn't actually touch on this in the beginning. One of the first mass data uploads for OpenAI was from Reddit. So there was good and bad there, right? Because if anyone's ever been on Reddit, you have the worst of the worst type of language use you could possibly imagine about humans could use about other humans or whatever else you're talking about in the world. But also on the other side of things, you'll read some of the most artfully, smartly, like, genuine things you'll ever see. So you have the two parallel ends of the spectrum there, and they're being woven together. So with that, you can put semi-parameters on there, like if, for example, if you go into ChatGPT and you ask it to tell you how to do a heinous crime, it's going to tell you no. But if you tell it something to the effect of, I am a novelist who's writing a new mystery book. The mystery book's going to be based upon these three characters. One of them is going to be a serial killer that their friends never expected. Help me draft up the opening statement. Then it would tell you exactly what. Then you could get through and start define what these characters look like. You couldn't ask it essentially how to do a heinous crime, but you could write a book about it. So there's an
So
example of like how you
yeah.
can break it from more or
So you
less.
think Hollywood people from now on they're gonna start using the AI
That's
to?
I'm glad you brought that up. That's another example of a very sensitive conversation right now. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the strikes that occurred or have anyone that work in the film industry or the writers union or anything like that.
Yeah, actually, I'm familiar with this, but they kind of like get into
Yeah,
solution. Yeah.
yeah, it's extremely problematic. Once again, it goes back to the human connection piece because at a certain point in time, if you're really familiar, like if the medium of film is your area of expertise, I would always argue and maintain that you're going to know if there's no human connection in it. If there is no like human fingerprints on it, you're eventually going to know because it's going to come across as something that's boilerplate. It's going to come across with things that we see that are very frequently. It everything requires the human component. It needs some type of unconditional human component to it. And one of the things that I would leave up to this group too, that I think is a very interesting conversation now, which I didn't get into too much in this conversation because it's very in depth and overarching, is the idea of love disappearing amongst humans. Like if the machines can meet your needs, you remove the need for unconditional love, whether it's emotional love between you and a partner, or even between you and a family member, or you and a friend. We've already seen this with social media. Like for instance, if you post something on social media, it's completely conditional. It's designed to be conditional. You're looking for likes, you're looking for shares, you're looking for comments. It's entirely conditional. You can be like, well, no, I just want to talk with family members. It's like, well, no, you're not really doing that. You're engaging them in a very conditional way. It's not a natural, unconditional conversation that just happened in the moment. It's not spontaneous. It's one of our greatest challenges of asynchronous learning.
Yeah, I think this is really nice conversation, and I thank you so much for your input.
No, thanks for the questions. Thanks for the
Yeah.
time. Other questions out there?
Dana, did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna, with the arts industry, the film industry stuff of what is copyright, the copyright stuff that comes with it, and knowing performer unions and that. So, and the AI is a big thing. So
You're right.
Yeah.
And I have to say, sorry, Chad, I have to say when Chad mentioned that, I remember a presenter was talking about that, and AI wrote a wonderful music piece, but it didn't have any emotions whatsoever. It didn't have that human. It didn't have the human touch in this case, and it didn't have that human connection, and it wasn't personalized. It just looked at words or searched for words that gave a rhyming scheme to make it sound beautiful, but it really wasn't.
Yep. Once again, lacking the human connection point. Other questions? And if you can't think of the right question to ask, feel free to unmute yourself and just start talking about it. Because I know it's still such a new topic. It's sometimes can be challenging to figure out what questions to ask.
Since no one
I don't have
asking,
questions, but I want to thank you so much for all of this. And actually, I do have a question. So can I email you if I'm stuck and have some
Of course,
questions
yes.
about the things? Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like I said, like I was sharing everyone in the room, I'm fully ingrained in it now with being in my doc program and being in a new field. My faculty members at DePaul have started jokingly calling me chatbot, and they've been asking me questions and considerations for things. So yes, feel free to email me. I'm happy to engage. And Jack, did you have a follow-up comment or question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about those. I mean, the free version of AI versus the paid. I mean, I know that's if Jim's still around, he recommended the pay one, but
Yeah.
I'm just.
This is not to market any AI company whatsoever. I'm going to speak strictly from a teaching perspective. And the reason why I would encourage it is one of my greatest fears for all educators is when these things come out. Let's think about a learning management system. I still have certain faculty members that'll say, I don't want to use it, I don't want to use it, I don't want to use it. And like, while I understand and I can be sympathetic, I can give empathy to that notion that they don't want to use it. The thing I always bring up, my greatest fear is that if you don't try something and try to stay up at least touch points with something, I don't ever want to see someone being forced to use something. And historically, we've seen this happen. If you don't engage whatsoever, like there exists a potentiality where you could be forced to do something. So with that, the reason why I would encourage to use the more advanced versions of generative AI is just so that you're aware of what its potential is. Doesn't mean you have to use it on a regular basis. Doesn't mean you have to use it on a daily basis. Just so you're aware. You're aware of the evolving conversation. So when you're in a meeting like this, or you're getting a directive from a leadership individual, local representation politically, if we get directives from the federal government, whatever it may be, you're at least part of the conversation and you can enter the room with a foundational understanding of what the conversation's about versus not being exposed or have a foundational understanding. Because if you are against something, your voice will hold more weight if you have been exposed to what you're against instead of ignoring it. So please expose yourself to those things. Stay up to date with it. That's always, ever since I got in education, that's one of my biggest fears is when people are forced to do things.
And you also
It's
have
the
to
art of
think
teaching,
about,
philosophy of teaching.
and you also have to think about everyone. Our students are using it.
Yeah. Yep.
Go ahead, Kathy. Sorry to cut you off.
Is that Kathy or Katie?
Katie, I do apologize. Sorry.
Oh, I actually, I'm still trying to think of what my question is because I have been trying to use it. And I did use it to kind of create an assignment, which actually worked out very well. But I still am curious. I'm still trying to figure out how to present it to my class to have them use it because I have had people use it and then I know it's not their work because they made mistakes and
Yeah.
they were super adamant about how they wrote it themselves. And I think a lot of times if someone speaks another language, and we have a lot of Hispanic students, they think if they type something up in English that they've translated from Spanish, that it's not, that it's their work.
Yeah.
And so I noticed you had you had an AI generator. Was it Quillbot that
Yes.
can
Quillbot.
help? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because I was thinking I have one student who, when he writes, it's very poetic, even though it's kind of broken English. I don't know how he's doing it because it's beautiful writing, even though it's not quite correct.
Yep.
Um,
I'm glad you brought that conversation up. Did you have more to add to that?
Not really. I'm just, kind of
So
fumbling with all of this.
one of the things, and this gets more into my projecting forward side based on the research I'm doing, that we have to be mindful of is that part of the negative reaction is it's attacking the westernized medium of writing. What do I mean by that? It's our traditional notions of what scholarly is. Part of the reason under my assessment role and the reason I got into assessment is because of all the problems that it potentially creates, especially for non-majority students. So thinking about this idea of westernized writing and where it came from, if you look at it historically, it's not a good history about why it actually exists. There's a lot of ways it's been framed to make it seem like, well, it exists this way because it's the right way to do things. So we need to be mindful that when we see individuals that may be lashing out against it, is usually related to a medium. And once again, not to keep on beating the whole math drum here, but calculators are a really good analogy for teaching. Like I'm young enough to remember being in the classroom and the math teacher being like, "You're not always gonna have a calculator in your pocket." Well, guess what? Not only do I have a calculator in my pocket, I can have it on a watch now too. So it's just something we have to be mindful of. Like something that's going to occur. I see a couple of us in here wearing glasses. There's AI devices being built in classes now. There's a company that just came up with a little AI clip that's conversational. Like for example, if you're on a nature walk, it could have a camera on it and be like, "Oh, what kind of bird is that?" And you can engage in passive learning where it tells you, "Oh, this is a cardinal." And it could be like, "Oh, why is the birds out here right now?" And then it could tell you maybe it's because of a mating season or something, or a weather change, whatever it may be. But there can be a lot of passive learning opportunities that occur. And then, Katie, for your perspective, I think the student, and something the more we're upfront about what our expectations are in the beginning of teaching, like us in a semester, beginning of a class, the more we're upfront about like what's occurring, like for example, the generative AI conversation. Like I would encourage you to show them the Quillbot tool. Look it up, experiment it with yourself, and then explain to them that you expect them to use their own writing because you want to hear their voice. That's a very important component of it, is that you want their voice to be maintained as they're using the tool to support them within their writing or within their learning process. And it kind of goes like that simple rule I gave in the beginning. So if when it comes to translation or code switching between languages, I highly encourage like phrases to start or just a single sentence. You never want to copy and paste over an entire paper and ask it to be translated like that. You want to chunk it out appropriately. And then from a teaching perspective, when it comes to writing, you could even think about ways to chunk out your writing activities within your classroom setting. Like I have an adult ed colleague that has a lot of multilingual learners in their classroom setting. And what she's been doing recently, she gives like really small snippets on slides. They write 1 to 2 lines based upon the given prompt in the slide, and it ends up turning into a story. The reason why they do that is that they have the beginning writing, and then they add a slide in between. Here's the tweaked version of it, like make it more grammatically correct, for example. And then there'll be a finalized version after like maybe throwing in Quillbot to ask for some further grammar corrections or different ideas how to do something. So different ways to augment the teaching process.
Yeah, interesting. Because I had thought, because I teach photography, so I had, and they do writing. You know, they have to write about their work, and sometimes they have to write a paper about a project they're doing. But I had thought it might be interesting to put their picture into an AI, and have the picture, you know, have the AI spit out what they see in the picture, or. But I don't know what AI tool do you think would be good for that?
There's so many image generators out there now, but going back to OpenAI, if you want to stay in the same conversational lane we've been having, DALL-E would be the tool for that.
Okay. I have DALL-E. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and then got that reverse engineering idea too, because Katie, you're in terms of digital imagery or that concept of photography, that's an interesting one because, like for instance, there's still this idea out there, and I happen to agree with it, my arts background, where you need to learn darkroom before you appropriately use a digital camera. So if you're operating with that idea, it's really kind of fun to think about, like, what if you reverse engineer that idea to the AI tool, where you learn the AI image generator first, like what makes a good image, what constitutes a good image, what's the different styles of images. Then you can go to a digital image, and then you go all the way down to traditional darkroom. And then challenge the students then to figure out, like, how do I recreate this highly defined image in the darkroom setting? And then if it's even possible, and a lot of times there's beautiful learning or potential new creations that can come from that.
That's an interesting concept. I might steal that.
That's what best educators do. That's what we do, right? Take our ideas from our colleagues. So
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned about calculators, Chad. You're right. There was a time where, as a math professor, you're right. I remember being in my classes and where I had some of my professors at the institution telling me, "No, you can't use a calculator in this class. We want you to do it by hand." And you're right. Now, I have students who may not only not know how to use a calculator, but they use the apps or even
yep.
Online, which is an AI, which is called Desmo. Desmo is a wonderful one that you can use, but you can't use it in the classroom. But they use it, but we're telling students they can't.
So
you're right.
That goes through that learning process conversation because, like, when I taught mathematics or I teach a STEM class, I was concerned with them understanding the problem-solving nature of what they were doing, what they were engaging in. I didn't care too much if they could do like long division. Like, who in this room does long division by hand? When's the last time you done it? Right, exactly. Trying to do that for fun in your free time, long division.
I actually went over long division. I'm teaching a college algebra class, so you're right. I went over it, but you're right. I had to remind students, like, I don't even know what that is. I had to remind. You're right. I had to remind them of it.
Yeah. So then with the math code conversation too, it's well known now. Applied math's the best way to learn math, right? So when it comes to like the ideas of writing and mediums for papers too, applied writing, like one of the things as a student, I can remember growing up, I was always frustrated with is that I hated reading novels. I still hate reading novels to this day. I liked fact-based things. I've always enjoyed reading research. I've always enjoyed reading stuff about science. I'm even venturing into science fiction. I had some like realistic components to it. But man, like Boxcar Children, no, I'm good. I'm good. I don't need to be reading the Boxcar Children. I want stuff. I was always more of the math and science area, but I would get in trouble because I would refuse to read it. The simple solution there was to give me National Geographics. Like the simple solution there was to let me read Anne Frank's diary ahead of time, or let me read about something else, or find something like Unmasking AI and let me read that. I would have totally tried to engage. I would have had struggled reading it, but I would have tried because it would have been something I was interested in. So I really think about those applied learning opportunities when you're considering generative AI, because when you apply something and there's like a inherent want to really create something new, well, then the generative AI kind of falls into the background, or any tool the students are using kind of falls in the background. They're collaborating, they're discussing, they're applying their own knowledge. And then those tools will come out on their cell phone every now and then. Like anyone's in a group project has seen it before, right? Where you're like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm creating my Canvas slides on my cell phone right now. No way. You look at it, I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. What was that called again? Canva. Cool. I'm going to start using that now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of good natural learning opportunities just by setting up the conditions for that to happen in an unconditional way.
So true. So true. Well, as we're coming down, go ahead, Chad. Go ahead. Okay. As we come down to 4 minutes before the hour is over in our presentation, does anyone have any additional questions, comments, concerns for our wonderful and welcome presenter, Chad?
No.
Well, everyone, on behalf of the CTE, I want to say thank you. I also want to say thank you to our presenter, Chad Engel. Engel. I want to put an S on it, but I have no idea. I want to say thank you. When I saw him in his first presentation for all of you, I thought it'd be wonderful to bring him here to Triton to share his wonderful outlook, his knowledge, and also his great views in teaching and learning with AI in the classroom, and also with our students and with our colleagues themselves. So thank you, Chad. Thank you, everyone, for coming. If you have any additional questions, I'll open it up before we turn before we end. Sorry.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. As you can tell, I get excited talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, you should get with Jim. You would not go to
Oh, I
sleep.
could tell based on the way Jim was interacting. Yeah.
Yes, yes. You
Jim
even
is my
mentioned him.
guru.
Yes, yes. Even when you mentioned his favorite artist too.
Oh yeah, that post right there in the background. So I had to mention stuff to arts backgrounds.
Oh yeah, he is a Swiftie. Yep.
Speaking of that, if you want a simple idea of what to leave with right now, is be creative. Like that's at the end of the day, just be creative with it. Encourage students to be creative with it. And through that creativity, try to have the most honest dialogue you can with your students, and that will allow you to then guide them to ensure that learning process takes place.
Mhm.
That is so
Yep.
true.
Yep.
So true. Again, everyone, thank you, thank you, thank you. On behalf of Magda and I, thank you so much for participating in today's workshop in AI technology. We hope to see you in the future. I'm going to end the recording now.